Before we begin our journey into the shadowy and complex world of one of the most powerful and elusive criminals in modern history, a crucial disclaimer must be presented to you, the viewer. The narrative you are about to immerse yourself in is not a work of fiction, but a meticulously compiled account constructed from a vast array of documented sources, including but not limited to official court records from India and abroad, extensive investigative journalism reports, declassified intelligence files from various international agencies, and the testimonies of those who operated within this labyrinthine world. The purpose of this detailed exposition is solely to present a coherent, factual, and comprehensive chronicle of the life, crimes, and enduring legacy of Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar for educational and informational purposes. The events we will traverse are often dark, unsettling, and reveal the profound depths of human ambition and brutality, yet they form an indispensable chapter in understanding the interplay of crime, politics, and global terrorism in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Our singular aim is to ensure that a well-researched and accurate version of this story reaches you, stripping away the layers of myth and sensationalism to reveal the core facts. If you find these deep dives into the intricate and often hidden narratives of our world compelling, I encourage you to become a part of this community of knowledge seekers. Please show your support by liking this video. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribing for more such detailed explorations, and importantly, hitting the bell icon so you are notified every time we unveil another untold story. Now, find a comfortable space, quiet your mind, and prepare yourself for an epic tale of unimaginable power, audacious criminal enterprise, and a man who defied nations to become a phantom, the story of the untouchable Lord. Our story begins not in the gleaming, sterile skyscrapers of international finance or the shadowy backrooms of global power, but in the vibrant, chaotic, and fiercely passionate lanes of Dongri, a densely packed, historically significant Muslim majority neighborhood in the very heart of old Bombay. It was here, on a December day in 1955, that Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar was born into a family of modest means. His father, Ibrahim Kaskar, serving as a head constable in the Bombay police, a man who upheld the law in a city where the lines between law and lawlessness were often dangerously blurred. The Bombay of the 1960s and early 70s, where Dawood spent his formative years, was a city of stark and dramatic contrasts, a bustling, ambitious metropolis where dreams were woven on the looms of its textile mills and the sets of its film studios, existing side by side with deep-seated communal tensions and a thriving, increasingly powerful underworld. Young Dawood grew up in this intense and formative crucible, a boy noted by those who knew him as being bright, observant, but profoundly restless, possessing an ambition that far outstripped the conventional opportunities his environment offered. He watched with a keen and calculating eye as the city's criminal landscape, then dominated by the formidable and physically intimidating Pathans and other smaller, localized gangs, operated with a brazen impunity, controlling the highly lucrative illicit trades of gambling, bootlegging, and protection rackets. He saw the raw power, the flashy displays of wealth, and the perverse form of respect that these men commanded on the streets, a form of power that seemed far more immediate and tangible than the slow, grinding progress offered by a traditional education or a modest job. The schoolyard and the narrow bylanes of Dongri became his first classroom in the art of survival and dominance, where he learned early that strength, whether of muscle or of will, was the ultimate currency. It was a world where disputes were settled not in courtrooms, but with fists, knives, and later, guns, and where loyalty was a commodity both precious and perilous. This was the fertile ground, the perfect ecosystem, in which the seeds of a future criminal empire were sown, not by a mindless thug, but by a shrewd, ambitious young man who understood the dynamics of his world and was patiently waiting for his moment to rewrite its rules. He started small, as most legends do, not with a grand declaration of war, but with minor skirmishes, gathering around him a band of loyal, similarly disaffected young men who were drawn to his emerging leadership and his promise of a future far removed from the poverty and obscurity of their origins. This nascent gang, which would later evolve into the terrifyingly efficient organization known as the D Company, began by challenging the existing petty criminals in their own territory, establishing their own small-scale extortion rings and taking control of minor gambling dens. It was a period of apprenticeship, a time for Dawood to hone his strategic mind, to understand the intricacies of running an illicit business, and most importantly, to build an unshakable core of trust with his initial lieutenants, men like his elder brother Shabir and Chota Rajan, a partnership that would later define and then violently fracture the Indian underworld. This was the humble, unglamorous beginning of a criminal journey that would eventually spiral outwards to shake the very foundations of a nation and capture the attention of the entire world. A journey that started with a young boy looking at the powerful figures on the streets of Bombay and deciding, with a cold and determined clarity, that one day he would not just join them, he would surpass them all. The ascent of Dawood Ibrahim from a local street enforcer to a name that would command fear and respect across the Indian underworld was not a sudden explosion, but a meticulously calculated and ruthlessly executed campaign, a masterclass in the violent transfer of power. The established order, represented by the formidable Pathans, men like Karim Lala and Mastan Mirza, who were known for their brute strength and old-school methods, initially viewed the upstart from Dongri as little more than an irritant, a minor nuisance to be swatted away. However, they gravely underestimated the sharp, strategic intellect and the boundless ambition that fueled this new challenger. Dawood's philosophy was starkly different. He understood that in the modern world of crime, discipline, corporate-like structure, and strategic terror were far more effective than undisciplined brutality. He began to systematically target the weaknesses in the Pathans' operations, not with frontal assaults, but with guerrilla-style tactics, hijacking their smuggling consignments, muscling in on their protection rackets, and poaching their key operatives with promises of greater rewards and a more visionary leadership. The turning point, the event that announced his arrival with a thunderclap of violence, was the brutal murder of Samad Khan, a prominent and feared Pathan gangster, in 1976. This was not just a killing, it was a declaration of war, a message etched in blood that the old guard was no longer in charge. The murder sent shockwaves through the underworld, signaling that a new, more dangerous, and more cunning power had emerged, one that was unafraid to challenge the most entrenched interests. Dawood's modus operandi became clear, a blend of calculated violence to eliminate competition and instill fear, coupled with a shrewd business acumen that sought to streamline and expand criminal enterprises like never before. He recognized that the real money lay not just in street-level extortion, but in large-scale organized smuggling. And he turned his attention to the bustling docks of Bombay, the city's lifeline and its most porous border. Through a combination of bribes, threats, and strategic alliances with corrupt customs officials and port authorities, he began to build a sophisticated smuggling network, bringing in gold, electronics, and other contraband from the Gulf, effectively creating a parallel economy that flooded the Indian market. This was the foundation of his immense wealth, a financial engine that would fund his future ambitions and his vast organization. The D Company was no longer just a gang. It was becoming a corporation with Dawood as its undisputed CEO. He established a strict code of conduct for his men, emphasizing loyalty, secrecy, and efficiency. And he rewarded those who served him well with immense riches and power, creating a culture of devotion that bordered on the fanatical. His influence began to seep into the legitimate world, particularly the Bombay film industry, a sector flush with black money and vulnerable to strong-arm tactics. He became a financier, a protector, and for some, a terrifying predator, his name whispered with a mixture of awe and dread in the studios of Bollywood. This period of the late 1970s and early 1980s was the crucible in which the legend of Dawood Ibrahim was forged, a period where he consolidated his power, built his financial empire, and demonstrated a unique ability to operate in both the shadowy criminal underworld and the glittering, corrupt world of high society. He was no longer just a gangster, he was a don, a figure whose authority was absolute within his domain and whose reputation was spreading far beyond the confines of Bombay, setting the stage for a conflict and an event that would catapult him from national notoriety to global infamy. The decade of the 1980s marked a period of meteoric and terrifying consolidation for Dawood Ibrahim, a phase where the D Company transformed from a powerful criminal syndicate based in Bombay into a pan-Indian and eventually international enterprise with tentacles reaching into every conceivable illicit trade. This expansion was fueled by the immense profits from the gold smuggling operations, which acted as the financial lifeblood, allowing Dawood to diversify his portfolio with a businessman's foresight and a gangster's ruthlessness. The real estate sector, with its opaque deals and massive flows of unaccounted money, became a natural playground for the organization, which used a combination of muscle power and financial clout to strong, armed property acquisitions and development projects, effectively laundering black money into white assets on an industrial scale. Simultaneously, the D Company tightened its grip on Bollywood, moving beyond casual extortion to becoming a central pillar of the industry's financing, with Dawood and his key lieutenants acting as producers and powerful behind. The scene's brokers who could make or break careers with a single phone call. This deep entanglement with the film world served a dual purpose. It was a highly effective method of money laundering, with film budgets being notoriously fluid, and it provided a glamorous veil of legitimacy and immense cultural influence, allowing the gangster to cultivate an image of a powerful, charismatic kingmaker. However, this period of ascendancy was not without its brutal internal and external conflicts. The very nature of his growing empire bred resentment and rivalry, most notably with another rising gangster, Arun Gali, whose power base in the Dagdi Chaul area of Baikula posed a direct challenge to Dawood's hegemony. This led to a bloody and protracted gang war that turned the streets of central Bombay into a battlefield, with assassinations and retaliatory killings becoming a grim daily occurrence, demonstrating the savage price of supremacy in this shadow world. It was also during this time that Dawood's strategic mind began to conceive of a structure that would make his organization more resilient and globally dispersed. He started sending trusted associates abroad to establish bases in Dubai, Karachi, Singapore, and later London and Nairobi, creating an international network that would prove crucial for money laundering, securing havens, and managing operations beyond the reach of Indian law enforcement. This global footprint was unprecedented for an Indian crime lord and marked his evolution into a transnational criminal. Yet, beneath the surface of this criminal empire building, a more sinister and volatile element was being introduced into the D Company's DNA, the poison of communalism, the increasingly charged political atmosphere in India, culminating in the seismic events surrounding the Babri Masjid dispute, began to influence the underworld's dynamics. Dawood, a Muslim don operating in a city with a history of communal violence, found his identity and that of his organization being politicized in dangerous new ways. His association with Muslim gangsters and his own religious background, which had previously been a non-issue in the pragmatically secular world of crime, suddenly became a defining characteristic in the eyes of some political and religious groups. This set the stage for a catastrophic convergence of crime, politics, and terrorism. The D Company was no longer just a criminal organization seeking profit. It was becoming an entity whose actions would soon be driven by a toxic mix of business, revenge, and a warped sense of communal solidarity. A shift that would culminate in an act of such monstrous proportions that it would forever sear the name Dawood Ibrahim into the global consciousness as a mastermind of terror, fundamentally altering his legacy and setting him on a path of permanent exile and becoming the world's most wanted fugitive. The cataclysm that would forever redefine Dawood Ibrahim's legacy and plunge the city of Bombay into an abyss of terror was the meticulously planned and brutally executed series of bombings on March 12, 1993. To understand the genesis of this unprecedented act of violence, one must look to the preceding months, specifically the dark December of 1992, when the Babri Masjid in Ayodhya was demolished, an event that triggered widespread communal riots across India, with Bombay suffering some of the most brutal and one-sided violence. The riots, which saw the Muslim community targeted and victimized on a massive scale, created a deep and festering wound, a sense of profound injustice and helplessness that resonated through the city's Muslim neighborhoods, including Dongri, Dawood's own home turf. It was from this cauldron of rage, fear, and a desperate desire for retribution that the plot for the bombings was conceived. The narrative, as pieced together by investigators, suggests that Dawood Ibrahim, along with his key lieutenants, Tiger Memon and Yaqub Memon, operating from the safe haven of Dubai, decided to orchestrate a revenge of such staggering proportions that it would shake the nation to its core. The planning was conducted with the cold efficiency of a military operation, leveraging the D company's extensive international network for logistics and financing. A team of operatives was sent to Pakistan for training in the use of explosives and sophisticated weaponry, while the components for the bombs, including the deadly military-grade explosive RDX, were smuggled into India through the D company's well-established maritime routes. The same channels previously used for gold, now repurposed for a far more sinister cargo. The sheer scale of the conspiracy was immense, involving dozens of individuals, multiple locations for bomb assembly, and a complex web of financiers and facilitators spread across several countries. On that fateful Friday, a day typically bustling with life, the city was utterly unprepared for the orchestrated hell that was about to be unleashed. The first bomb detonated in the basement of the Bombay Stock Exchange, the symbolic heart of India's financial capital, instantly transforming a beacon of economic progress into a scene of carnage and chaos. This was not an isolated strike. It was the opening salvo in a coordinated attack designed to inflict maximum terror and damage. In a horrifying sequence over the next 2 hours, 12 more explosions ripped through a series of high-profile targets across the city: the Air India building, the Hotel Sea Rock, the Plaza Cinema, and even the crowded streets at the Worli Fishermen's Colony, among others. The choice of targets was chillingly strategic, aiming not just to kill and maim, but to shatter the city's sense of security, attack its economic institutions, and send a message of vengeful power. The human cost was catastrophic, with over 250 people killed and more than 700 injured. The victims belonging to all communities, their lives obliterated in a firestorm meant to avenge one act of violence with an even greater one in the immediate aftermath. As Bombay reeled from the shock and the smoke cleared to reveal the full extent of the devastation, the investigation zeroed in with laser focus on the D Company. The evidence trail, pieced together through confessions, financial records, and intelligence intercepts, led unequivocally to Dubai and to Dawood Ibrahim, the architect of this atrocity. India issued a red corner notice through Interpol, and for the first time, Dawood was officially designated a global terrorist, a title that would stick to him permanently. The 1993 bombings were the point of no return. They marked his irrevocable transformation from a powerful gangster and smuggling kingpin into a fugitive accused of mass murder and terrorism. A man who had weaponized his criminal empire to execute one of the most devastating terrorist attacks on Indian soil. An act that would ensure he could never return to the city that created him and would forever place him at the top of the world's most wanted lists. The aftermath of the 1993 Bombay bombings marked the definitive end of one chapter in Dawood Ibrahim's life and the beginning of another, far more complex and shadowy existence as the world's most wanted fugitive. With the Indian authorities and international agencies now in relentless pursuit, his base in Dubai became untenable, forcing a strategic and permanent relocation to Karachi, Pakistan. This move, while a retreat in one sense, was a calculated consolidation in another, as it placed him under the purported protection of a state that India accused of harboring him, adding a volatile geopolitical dimension to his flight from justice. In Karachi, Dawood's life underwent a dramatic transformation. The flamboyant, publicly visible Don of Dubai was replaced by a ghost, a man who operated from a series of heavily fortified, secretive safe houses, his movements shrouded in utmost secrecy. His very existence becoming a subject of intense speculation and diplomatic friction between India and Pakistan. Despite this enforced seclusion, or perhaps because of it, the D Company did not wither away. Instead, it evolved, metastasizing like a cancer into a more decentralized yet more formidable transnational conglomerate of crime. From his new nerve center in Karachi, Dawood continued to exert iron-fisted control over his empire, using a web of trusted intermediaries, encrypted communication, and the sheer force of his reputation to manage his vast interests. The core businesses of smuggling and extortion were expanded and modernized, with a significant and highly profitable shift into the narcotics trade, particularly the smuggling of heroin from the Golden Triangle and Afghanistan into Europe and North America, leveraging his established international logistics network. Simultaneously, the D Company plunged into the realm of counterfeit currency, orchestrating the systematic pumping of high-quality fake Indian rupee notes into the Indian economy through borders in Nepal and Bangladesh, an economic sabotage tactic that undermined the financial security of the nation and generated enormous profits. His influence in Bollywood, though less overt, persisted through proxies, and his grip on the real estate sector in Mumbai and other Indian cities remained unnervingly strong, demonstrating his ability to project power even from a distance of thousands of miles. This period also saw the D Company's terrifying foray into the world of kidnapping for ransom, targeting high-profile industrialists and businessmen, with the most infamous case being the kidnapping of a prominent businessman for a staggering ransom, an act that showcased the gang's audacity and its deep penetration into the highest echelons of Indian society. However, This era of seemingly untouchable power was also punctuated by violent internal schisms that threatened to tear the organization apart from within. The most significant rupture was with his once trusted lieutenant, Chota Rajan, who, sensing a shift in Dawood's priorities towards a more communally charged agenda and fearing for his own position, broke away to form a rival gang. This betrayal was not just a professional split, it was deeply personal, sparking one of the bloodiest gang wars in Indian criminal history, a conflict fought on the streets of Mumbai, Bangkok, and Nairobi with assassinations and counter-assassinations that claimed dozens of lives, including many close associates of both Duns. This internal war exposed the vulnerabilities within the D Company and demonstrated that even Dawood's legendary control had its limits. Yet, through it all, his core organization, now often referred to as Indian Mujahideen, or D Company, interchangeably in intelligence dossiers, not only survived but adapted, becoming more entrenched in Pakistan and deepening its alleged ties with that country's intelligence apparatus, the ISI and terrorist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, transforming from a purely profit-driven criminal syndicate into a hybrid entity with clear links to anti-India terrorism, an evolution that cemented his status as a national security threat of the highest order and ensured that his story was far from over. The turn of the millennium saw the legend of Dawood Ibrahim solidify into a permanent fixture on the global security landscape, a spectral figure whose influence seemed to only grow in direct proportion to his invisibility. Safely ensconced in his Karachi sanctuary, he was no longer just a fugitive, but had become an institution, a brand name synonymous with a certain kind of invincible transnational power. The D Company's operations became more sophisticated, more integrated into the global underworld, and more brazen in their scope. The narcotics trade became an even more significant revenue stream, with the organization acting as a critical node in the pipeline, moving narcotics from Afghanistan's poppy fields to the streets of Europe, often using routes that traversed Africa and the Balkans, demonstrating a truly global reach. The counterfeit currency operation, known as black money, was perfected into a fine art. With printing presses allegedly located in Pakistan and Dubai producing fake Indian rupees of such high quality that they were nearly indistinguishable from genuine notes, a silent economic war that caused significant damage to the Indian economy and funded further criminal and terrorist activities. This period also witnessed the D Company's strategic diversification into new 21st century crimes, most notably cybercrime and credit card fraud, establishing cells in India and the Gulf that used sophisticated phishing techniques and skimming devices to steal millions, showing an ability to adapt to the digital age. Despite the geographical distance, Dawood's grip on Mumbai's underworld remained chillingly potent. His word was still law in the numerous illegal construction projects, the fishing industry, and the gray markets of the city. With his network of lieutenants and foot soldiers ensuring that a steady stream of revenue and intelligence flowed back to the boss in Karachi. This enduring control was a constant source of frustration for Indian security agencies, who watched as their most wanted man continued to manipulate events in his hometown from a safe haven. His personal life during this time, pieced together from rare intelligence reports and the accounts of defectors, was a paradox of gilded cage and austere secrecy. He was said to reside in the upscale Clifton area of Karachi, in a heavily fortified mansion equipped with state of the art security, living a life of luxury with his family, yet perpetually looking over his shoulder, his existence a series of calculated movements and trusted guards. Reports suggested a shift in his personal habits, with some accounts describing him as having become more religiously observant, a transformation that dovetailed with the increasingly jihadi tint of his organization's alliances. This era was also defined by the relentless and very public pursuit by Indian authorities, who turned the diplomatic screws, consistently presenting dossiers of evidence to Pakistan and international bodies like the United States, lobbying to have him declared an international terrorist. The pressure culminated in a significant victory for India when, in the wake of increased global focus on terrorism post 9/11, the United States, in 2003, officially designated Dawood Ibrahim as a specially designated global terrorist under its executive order for 3224, and the United Nations followed suit, adding him to its 1267 sanctions committee list for his affiliations with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. These designations were more than just symbolic. They imposed strict financial sanctions, freezing any assets he might have in member countries and prohibiting any transactions with him, a move aimed at strangling the financial arteries of his empire. Yet, remarkably, these international sanctions, while a major diplomatic blow, seemed to have little immediate impact on his operational capabilities or his lifestyle, a testament to the depth of his resources and the effectiveness of his network in circumventing global finance controls. He remained, as ever, the untouchable lord, a man who had successfully leveraged his notoriety into a form of dark immortality. His name whispered not just in the alleyways of Mumbai, but in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., and New Delhi, a permanent and elusive ghost in the machine of global crime and terrorism. The period following his international terror designations saw Dawood Ibrahim's narrative become deeply enmeshed with the escalating tensions between India and Pakistan, transforming him from a mere criminal into a persistent geopolitical flashpoint and a potent symbol of unresolved conflict. Indian authorities, fueled by a mixture of public pressure and national security imperative, launched an unprecedented multi-pronged campaign to bring him to justice, a campaign that combined aggressive diplomacy, sophisticated financial investigation, and covert intelligence operations. Dossier after dossier was presented to Pakistani authorities during diplomatic talks, meticulously detailing his whereabouts, often pinpointing specific bungalows in Karachi's Clifton and defense areas, his communication networks, and his ongoing criminal activities all met with consistent and firm denial from Pakistan, which maintained it had no knowledge of his presence on its soil. This diplomatic stalemate created a frustrating cycle of accusation and rebuttal. further poisoning the well of bilateral relations. Concurrently, Indian enforcement agencies like the Enforcement Directorate and the National Investigation Agency began a relentless pursuit of his financial empire within India, invoking stringent laws like the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to attach and seize a vast portfolio of properties and assets believed to be owned by him or his frontmen, from luxury apartments in Mumbai to commercial complexes in Pune and Delhi. This financial siege was aimed at crippling the economic infrastructure that sustained his organization and sent a powerful message to his network of associates. Perhaps the most dramatic front in this shadow war was the intelligence and covert operations dimension, which spilled out into the open with a series of dramatic events targeting key D company operatives and rivals. The near-fatal assassination attempt on Chota Rajan in a Bangkok hotel in 2000, where he was shot multiple times but miraculously survived, was widely attributed to Dawood's hitmen, showcasing his global reach and ruthlessness. This was followed by a string of killings of key Dawood aides in India, Nepal, and the Middle East, actions that intelligence analysts often linked to covert operations aimed at decapitating his network. The most sensational of these was the 2013 shooting in Karachi of Dawood's trusted lieutenant and brother-in-law Isaac Bukhari, an attack that bore all the hallmarks of a professional hit and sent shockwaves through the D Company, demonstrating that even his inner circle in his presumed safe haven was not immune to violence. This covert war reached a cinematic pitch with the curious case of a former Indian Navy officer turned alleged narcotics dealer, whom Indian media reports, citing intelligence sources, claimed was part of a botched plan to kidnap Dawood from his Karachi home, a mission that allegedly went awry and resulted in the officer's arrest by Pakistani authorities. While the veracity of such reports remains shrouded in mystery, they underscore the lengths to which agencies were willing to go and the almost mythical status Dawood had acquired. Throughout this period of intense pressure, the D Company continued to demonstrate a chameleon-like ability to adapt. They forged deeper alliances with Pakistan-based jihadist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, providing them with logistical support, funding, and their sophisticated smuggling networks for moving men and material into India, a synergy that made the D Company an even more formidable hybrid threat. The 2008 Mumbai attacks, carried out by Lashkar-Taiba, led to renewed Indian accusations that Dawood had provided crucial ground support and intelligence to the terrorists, a charge that further cemented his image as an enemy of the state. Despite the sanctions, the asset seizures, the covert wars, and the diplomatic isolation, Dawood Ibrahim remained frustratingly out of reach, his life in Karachi a subject of intense speculation, with occasional, unverified photographs surfacing in the media showing an aging, portly man at weddings or religious gatherings, images that were endlessly analyzed for clues about his health and morale. He was a king in a cage of his own making, but a king nonetheless, presiding over an empire that had proven to be remarkably resilient, adaptable, and terrifyingly potent, a dark testament to the enduring power of a man who had successfully defied the concerted efforts of two nations for over 2 decades. As the years rolled on and Dawood Ibrahim advanced into his late 60s, the narrative surrounding him began to subtly shift, evolving from a relentless manhunt to a more complex and somber contemplation of his enduring legacy and the seemingly intractable nature of his situation. The man himself became an increasingly spectral figure, with his physical presence fading into near total obscurity, replaced by a constant, low-frequency hum of speculation about his health, his influence, and his ultimate fate. Unverified and often contradictory reports would periodically surface in the media, some claiming he was suffering from a serious heart condition, diabetes, and depression, living a life of paranoid isolation. Others suggesting he remained actively involved in the day-to-day operations of his empire, his mind as sharp as ever, merely delegating the riskier physical tasks to a new generation of lieutenants. This opacity only served to amplify his myth, making every rumor, every alleged sighting, a subject of intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, the D Company as an entity continued its metamorphosis, becoming less a singular gang under one man's direct command and more a decentralized franchise, a loose confederation of criminal cells operating across South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, all connected by the shared brand of the D Company and its foundational networks, but often pursuing their own independent ventures. This structural evolution made the organization more resilient than ever, even if Dawood were to be captured or die. The vast, Hydra-headed network he built would likely continue to operate, a self-sustaining criminal ecosystem. His children, particularly his sons, were rumored to have been groomed to take over the legitimate parts of the business empire. Having been educated abroad and kept at a careful distance from the overt criminality of their father's world, a classic move by crime lords to ensure a legacy and a path to respectability for the next generation. On the geopolitical front, the stalemate persisted. India's diplomatic campaign to extradite him remained a top priority, with every high-level meeting between Indian and Pakistani officials invariably featuring his name on the agenda, yet yielding no tangible results. The United States, while maintaining its sanctions, seemed to have other pressing global priorities, and Dawood's case, while still open, no longer commanded the same urgent attention it once did in the international community. This created a strange and prolonged state of limbo. For India, he remained public enemy number one, a living embodiment of cross-border terrorism and unresolved justice for the victims of the 1993 bombings. For Pakistan, his continued presence, whether officially acknowledged or not, was a strategic asset and a persistent irritant in its relationship with India. For the global intelligence community, he was a case study in the evolution of transnational organized crime and its disquieting convergence with terrorism. And for the world of crime itself, he was an icon, a benchmark of success measured not in years of freedom, but in decades of defiant illusion. The very concept of his downfall, so central to the classic crime saga, had become ambiguous. There was no dramatic arrest, no final shootout, no conclusive end. His downfall was not a single event, but a slow, protracted process of fading into irrelevance on the world stage, even as his organization's tentacles continued to spread. He had achieved the ultimate criminal ambition: to become untouchable, but at the cost of becoming a ghost, a prisoner of his own notoriety. Forced to live in the shadows, his name both a source of power and a life sentence. The once flamboyant Don, who held court in Dubai hotels, was now a reclusive figure. His life a cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of absolute power and the immense personal price of becoming a legend in the underworld. A man who had everything and yet could enjoy nothing, forever looking over his shoulder, his name echoing through history as a synonym for both ultimate power and perpetual flight. The enduring mystery of Dawood Ibrahim's life in exile is punctuated by a series of enigmatic and often sensational claims that have periodically surfaced, each one adding another layer of intrigue to his already labyrinthine legend. One of the most persistent and debated aspects concerns his health, with a flurry of unverified reports in the mid-2010s and beyond suggesting a rapid and serious decline. These reports, often citing unnamed intelligence sources, claimed he was suffering from a range of debilitating ailments, including a critical heart condition requiring specialized treatment, advanced diabetes leading to complications, and severe depression that left him isolated and paranoid, even within his fortified sanctuary. Some accounts went so far as to suggest he had undergone secret medical procedures in Pakistani military hospitals or had flown to London for treatment under a pseudonym. Though no concrete evidence ever emerged to substantiate these dramatic claims, these health rumors were often intertwined with speculation about a potential power struggle within the D Company, as his perceived vulnerability could have created a vacuum, tempting ambitious lieutenants, or even his own family members, to jockey for position in anticipation of his demise. Another recurring theme in the narrative of his later years involves his purported romantic entanglements, most notably with a Pakistani actress, which became a staple of sensational media coverage in both India and Pakistan. This relationship was portrayed as a source of tension within his family and was even cited in some intelligence reports as a potential security liability, a rare chink in the armor of a man who had otherwise maintained an impenetrable veil of secrecy around his personal life beyond the gossip. More substantive reports emerged from Indian investigative agencies detailing his alleged attempts to further launder his wealth and reinvent his legacy. The Enforcement Directorate, in its charge sheets, outlined sophisticated schemes involving the purchase of expensive properties in Pakistan and the United Arab Emirates in the names of front companies and associates, suggesting an effort to sink his roots deeper into his host country and secure his family's future. There were also persistent, though difficult to verify, intelligence whispers about his desire to broker a deal, either with Indian authorities or through international mediators, possibly involving a secret surrender in exchange for certain guarantees, a narrative that spoke to the immense psychological toll of a life on the run, even for a man of his resources and resilience. These rumors of negotiation were always vehemently denied by official Indian sources, who maintained there would be no deals for the mastermind of the 1993 bombings, only a commitment to bring him to justice. The phenomenon of Dawood sightings also became a peculiar subplot, with occasional grainy photographs or short video clips leaking to the press showing a heavyset, aging man at a wedding or a religious gathering, his face often partially obscured. Each of these images would trigger a frenzied cycle of analysis by media and intelligence agencies alike, attempting to verify the location, the date, and the identities of others in the frame, a digital age treasure hunt for clues about the world's most elusive ghost. These glimpses, whether authentic or clever forgeries, served as periodic reminders that he was still out there, a tangible presence whose very image was a commodity. This constant churn of rumor, report, and speculation created a fog of war around Dawood Ibrahim, making it nearly impossible to separate fact from fiction. It demonstrated that even in his forced seclusion, he retained a powerful hold on the public imagination, his life story having transcended the realm of crime, reporting to become a sprawling, unfinished epic, a source of endless fascination and fear. The man had become a narrative, a collection of stories, each more incredible than the last, and it was within this tangled web of half-truths and mysteries that the final, and perhaps most definitive, chapter of his impact was being written. Not in the shadowy world of crime, but in the stark, unforgiving light of popular culture and political discourse. The cultural and political footprint of Dawood Ibrahim extends far beyond the confines of the underworld, having been indelibly stamped onto the consciousness of an entire nation, shaping its cinema, its political rhetoric, and its collective memory of trauma. In India, and particularly in Mumbai, the name Dawood Ibrahim is not merely that of a criminal. It is a powerful and multifaceted symbol, representing the dark underbelly of the city's economic boom, the lingering wounds of communal violence, and the frustrating limitations of state power in the face of well-connected transnational crime. This transformation into a cultural icon, albeit a dark one, is most vividly reflected in the world of Bollywood, an industry with which he had a long and deeply complicated relationship. For decades, his shadow has loomed large over Hindi cinema, both as a subject of fascination and as an unseen influence. Countless films have featured characters loosely or directly based on him, from the menacing Dubai-based Don in movies like D and Once Upon a Time in Mumbai, to more nuanced portrayals that explored his early life and rise to power. These cinematic representations have played a crucial role in mythologizing his story, often blurring the lines between the brutal reality of his actions and a more romanticized, almost Robin Hood-like narrative of a boy from the streets who took on the system, a narrative that he himself reportedly enjoyed and encouraged during his heyday in Dubai. Beyond being a muse, his alleged role as a financier and intimidator within the industry has become the stuff of legend, with numerous high-profile filmmakers and actors reportedly having been coerced into working on projects or paying protection money. Stories that have been chronicled in books and journalistic exposés, adding to the aura of fear and power that surrounds his name. In the political arena, Dawood Ibrahim became a potent and frequently wielded rhetorical weapon. For opposition parties in India, the government's inability to secure his extradition was, and remains, a stick with which to beat the ruling establishment, a symbol of national weakness and failed foreign policy. Every election cycle would see his name invoked in speeches and political advertisements, a convenient shorthand for accusing rivals of being soft on terrorism or of having questionable allegiances. The accusation of having links to Dawood became one of the most serious charges that could be leveled against a political opponent, capable of derailing careers and shaping public opinion. Internationally, his case became a key data point in the global study of the convergence of organized crime and terrorism, a textbook example of how a criminal network could provide logistical, financial, and operational support to jihadist groups, thereby becoming a non-state actor with the ability to influence international security and diplomacy. For the victims of the 1993 Bombay bombings and their families, however, his name is stripped of all myth and political utility. It is a painful and open wound, a symbol of unimaginable loss and a justice that has been cruelly delayed for decades. Their relentless pursuit of closure has kept the case alive in the courts and in the media, a somber reminder of the human cost behind the headlines and the political gamesmanship. Thus, Dawood Ibrahim exists in the Indian psyche as a complex and contradictory figure, a gangster and a terrorist to the state, a villain to the victims, a myth to the masses, a weapon to the politicians, and a case study to the global intelligence community. This multifaceted legacy is perhaps his most profound achievement and his most enduring punishment. He is forever frozen in the amber of history, a man who can never escape the colossal shadow of his own infamy, his story endlessly retold, debated, and dissected, ensuring that long after he is gone, the name Dawood Ibrahim will continue to resonate, a permanent and unsettling echo in the corridors of power and the alleyways of popular imagination. The 11th chapter of this saga delves into the intricate and shadowy financial architecture of the D Company, an empire built not on brick and mortar, but on a fluid, global, and notoriously resilient network of illicit capital flows that has allowed it to withstand the concerted pressure of international sanctions and national investigations. At its peak, the economic might of Dawood Ibrahim's organization was staggering, with intelligence estimates from various agencies suggesting an annual turnover running into billions of dollars, a figure that would place it on par with many legitimate multinational corporations. The genius of this financial system lay in its sophisticated layering and its deep integration with the legitimate global economy, making the task of untangling the web a Herculean challenge for financial forensic experts. The traditional cash cows of gold smuggling and extortion provided the foundational, high liquidity cash, but it was the foray into narcotics that supercharged their financial firepower. The heroin trade, leveraging routes from Afghanistan through Pakistan and into Europe and Africa, generated profits of an astronomical scale, creating a problem of abundance. How to launder such vast sums of black money and convert them into white, legitimate-looking assets. The solution was a multi-pronged global laundering strategy, the Indian real estate market. With its historically high proportion of cash transactions and opaque ownership records, became a primary sink for this illicit wealth. The D Company, through a labyrinthine network of benami proxy transactions, would pump billions into property developments in Mumbai, Delhi, Hyderabad, and Goa, effectively washing the drug and extortion money by mingling it with legitimate investments, inflating property prices, and corrupting the sector from within. Bollywood, with its famously creative accounting practices and fluid production budgets, served as another highly effective laundry machine, where black money could be invested as production capital and later returned as supposedly legitimate profits from box office receipts and music rights. Beyond India's borders, the network utilized the bustling trading hubs of Dubai, Hong Kong, and Singapore, setting up front companies involved in import, export, particularly of diamonds, textiles, and electronics. These businesses would generate inflated invoices for international transfers, moving money seamlessly across borders under the guise of legitimate trade payments. The Hawala system, an informal value transfer system based on trust and intricate networks of brokers, was the bloodstream of this entire operation, allowing for the instantaneous movement of massive sums across the globe without leaving any digital paper trail for authorities to follow. A promise of payment in Mumbai would result in cash delivery in Dubai or Karachi within hours, making the traditional banking system's anti-money laundering protocols largely irrelevant. The implementation of international sanctions by the US and UN in 2003 was a significant challenge, designed to freeze these financial arteries. It forced the D Company to become even more clandestine and innovative. They began relying more heavily on shell companies in offshore havens, using complex corporate structures that obscured the ultimate beneficial owner. There were also intelligence reports suggesting the organization started investing in digital currencies and other emerging financial technologies to stay ahead of the curve. The Enforcement Directorate in India, armed with stronger laws, has scored some successes, attaching properties worth hundreds of crores allegedly linked to the syndicate. But these seizures are believed to be merely a fraction of the total empire. The sheer scale, global reach, and adaptive nature of Dawood's financial network have cemented his status not just as a gangster, but as a financial superpower in the underworld, a man who understood that in the modern era, true power is not just measured in territory controlled by fear, but in capital accumulated and laundered into legitimacy, creating an economic legacy that may well outlive the man himself. The 12th chapter in this chronicle examines the profound and lasting impact of the D Company on the very fabric of Indian society, its security apparatus, and the global perception of organized crime, a legacy that is far more pervasive and deeply rooted than the actions of any single individual. The rise and entrenchment of Dawood Ibrahim's syndicate fundamentally altered the ecosystem of crime in India, moving it from a landscape of disparate, territorially bound gangs to a corporatized, international enterprise that set a new, terrifying benchmark for ambition and operational scale. This model of a discipline, globally networked organization, became the aspirational template for a new generation of criminals who saw in Dawood's story a blueprint for how to transcend local notoriety and achieve a form of dark globalization. The techniques he pioneered, the use of hawala for moving money, the establishment of safe havens in jurisdictions with weak extradition treaties, the deep corruption of government and law enforcement officials, and the strategic alliance between organized crime and political interests have been studied and emulated by countless other syndicates across South Asia. His most devastating legacy, however, remains the chilling fusion of criminality with religiously motivated terrorism, a paradigm shift that he orchestrated with the 1993 Bombay bombings. This act demonstrated to the world how a profit-driven criminal network could be weaponized for ideological warfare, providing a playbook that other hybrid threats would later follow. The failure to bring him to justice, despite decades of pursuit and overwhelming evidence of his whereabouts, has had a corrosive effect on public faith in the Indian state's ability to protect its citizens and hold the powerful accountable. For the families of the 1993 victims, this failure is a continuous, open wound, a daily reminder of a justice system that, in their view, has been outmaneuvered by a fugitive sheltered by a hostile state. On a structural level, the threat posed by the D Company forced a massive and costly overhaul of India's internal security and intelligence infrastructure. The Research and Analysis Wing RAW, the Intelligence Bureau IB, and later the National Investigation Agency, NIA, had to dedicate significant resources and develop new methodologies to track his network, engage in complex financial investigations, and counter the sophisticated propaganda and recruitment tactics employed by his organization and its jihadist allies. The constant pressure from his network also exposed critical vulnerabilities in India's coastal security, its financial monitoring systems, and its border controls, leading to reforms that were, in many ways, accelerated by the revelations following the 2008 Mumbai attacks, which bore the fingerprints of the D Company's modus operandi. In the geopolitical sphere, his presence in Pakistan became a permanent and volatile fixture in the already fraught relationship between the two nuclear armed neighbors, a symbol of Pakistan's alleged policy of using non-state actors as strategic assets, a charge that Islamabad consistently denies, but which forms the core of India's diplomatic offensive against it. For the global community, Dawood Ibrahim stands as one of the prototypical figures of 21st century transnational crime, a forerunner to the likes of Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman, but with the added, more dangerous dimension of proven links to international terrorism. His life story is a stark lesson in how globalization's tools, ease of travel, instant communication, and integrated financial markets can be harnessed for malign purposes creating a stateless, rootless criminal entity that is incredibly difficult to combat with traditional nation-state-centric law enforcement. The D Company, therefore, is not just a criminal organization. It is a phenomenon, a dark mirror reflecting the interconnected vulnerabilities of our modern world. Its enduring power, long after its founder has retreated into the shadows, is a testament to the fact that Dawood's most significant creation was not his personal fortune or his myth, but a self-sustaining criminal institution that has permanently altered the landscape of crime and security in South Asia and beyond, ensuring that his influence will be felt for generations to come, regardless of his personal fate. The 13th phase of this narrative plunges into the heart of the D Company's most devastating and controversial alliance, its deep and synergistic relationship with Pakistan-based jihadist organizations, a partnership that transformed it from a criminal syndicate into a full-spectrum hybrid threat against India. This was not a mere marriage of convenience, but a strategic fusion of capabilities that served the objectives of both entities. The terrorist groups gained access to the D Company's sophisticated smuggling routes, its vast financial resources, and its deep-rooted intelligence network within India, while Dawood's organization acquired a potent ideological shield and the implicit protection of a state that viewed these jihadist proxies as strategic assets. The genesis of this alliance can be traced back to the aftermath of the 1993 bombings, when Dawood, now a fugitive on Pakistani soil, needed powerful local patrons to guarantee his security and operational freedom. Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence (ISA) Directorate, which had long used non-state actors to wage a proxy war in Kashmir and beyond, saw in Dawood a uniquely valuable asset, a seasoned criminal operator with an extensive network inside India who could be leveraged for complex operations that required deep penetration and local knowledge. The relationship was cemented with the D Company's alleged role in the 2008 Mumbai attacks, where, according to Indian and American intelligence agencies, its network provided critical logistical support to the 10 Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists who carried out the 3-day siege. This support reportedly included pre-attack reconnaissance of the targets: the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, and the Chabad House, arranging safe houses and facilitating the terrorists' sea filtration from Karachi to Mumbai, using the D Company's classic maritime smuggling routes. This was the ultimate manifestation of the criminal terror nexus, a crime syndicate providing the infrastructure for a mass casualty terrorist attack. Beyond logistics, the financial symbiosis between the two entities became a major focus of international concern. The D Company's massive counterfeit currency operation, which pumped fake Indian rupee notes into the economy, was not just a criminal enterprise. It was a form of economic terrorism designed to undermine the Indian rupee and fund jihadist activities. The profits from the narcotics trade were similarly funneled to groups like Lashkar, Taiba, and Jaish-Mohammed, creating a vicious cycle where drug addiction in Europe and Africa helped fund terrorism in South Asia. This alliance also provided the D company with a pool of highly motivated, ideologically driven foot soldiers who could be used for high-risk operations, supplementing their own cadre of career criminals. For Dawood personally, this partnership offered a form of political legitimization within certain circles in Pakistan, rebranding him from a mere gangster into a mujahid or freedom fighter in the narrative pushed by his supporters, a grotesque distortion of his primarily profit-driven motives. This rebranding made it politically more palatable for elements within the Pakistani establishment to continue sheltering him, despite the international sanctions and India's persistent extradition requests. The convergence was so complete that Indian intelligence agencies often stopped distinguishing between the D Company and groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, referring to a fused entity they called the D Company Indian Mujahideen Network, which they held responsible for a series of urban terror attacks in India throughout the 2000s and 2010s. This transformation represents the final and most dangerous evolution of the D Company, an evolution that ensured Dawood Ibrahim would forever be enshrined on the world's most wanted lists, not just as a kingpin, but as a key node in the global jihadist infrastructure, a man who had successfully bartered his criminal expertise for protection and a perverse form of power, forever linking his name to the deadliest forms of modern terrorism and ensuring that his capture became not just a law enforcement priority, but a critical imperative for international security. The 14th chapter of this epic saga turns its gaze inward, to the very human toll of this decade's long conflict, focusing on the shattered lives, the broken loyalties, and the personal tragedies that form the dark, often forgotten underbelly of the Dawood Ibrahim legend. Beyond the geopolitical grandstanding and the financial statistics lies a sprawling tapestry of individual suffering and moral compromise, a sobering reminder that the true cost of organized crime is measured not in currency, but in human despair. Foremost in this narrative are the victims of the 1993 Bombay bombings and their families, for whom the name Dawood Ibrahim is not a symbol of power, but a synonym for an irreparable, lifelong loss. The over 250 individuals who perished that day were not faceless statistics. They were fathers, mothers, children, and dreams extinguished in a firestorm of revenge. The more than 700 injured carried not just physical scars, but deep psychological trauma, their lives irrevocably altered. For these families, the 3-decade long failure to bring the mastermind to justice is a continuous, agonizing form of punishment, a wound that is reopened with every unverified photograph of him in Karachi, every political debate that uses his name as a rhetorical weapon, and every passing year that diminishes the hope of ever seeing him stand trial in an Indian court. Their relentless pursuit of closure, fought in courtrooms and through public campaigns, stands as a powerful, haunting counterpoint to the narrative of Dawood's invincibility. But the victims extend far beyond those directly affected by the blasts. There are the countless businessmen, small and large, who for decades have been forced to pay protection, money to the D Company's foot soldiers operating a parallel, extortionate taxation system that stifles enterprise and breeds a culture of fear and compliance. There are the Bollywood personalities, some of whom have spoken out at great personal risk, who describe an industry once held hostage by the syndicate, forced to cast certain actors, hire certain producers, and surrender creative control at the barrel of a gun. Their artistic freedom sacrificed to the whims of a distant Don. The human cost is also starkly visible within the underworld itself, in the brutal gang wars that have claimed hundreds of lives. The bloody schism with Chota Rajan alone led to a trail of corpses from Mumbai to Nairobi, with trusted lieutenants, foot soldiers, and innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of a personal feud between two former friends. These men, often drawn into a life of crime by poverty and the lure of quick money, met violent, anonymous ends. Their stories reduced to brief news items about yet another gangland killing. The families they left behind were left to grapple with both grief and social stigma. Furthermore, the relentless pressure from law enforcement has ensnared countless lower and mid-level operatives of the D Company, men who are now serving long prison sentences in Indian jails, having paid the price for their loyalty, while the architect of their crimes remains free. These are the pawns sacrificed in the great game, their lives and freedoms forfeit, while the king remains secure. Even for Dawood Ibrahim himself, there is a profound personal cost, a paradox of his own creation. The man who sought ultimate power and freedom has achieved a form of dark immortality, but at the expense of everything that constitutes a normal life. He is a prisoner of his own notoriety, confined to a gilded cage in Karachi, unable to walk freely in the sun, to visit the city of his birth, or to live without the constant, gnawing fear of betrayal or assassination. His relationships are likely transactional, his trust a scarce commodity. The reports of his ill health and depression paint a picture not of a triumphant king, but of an isolated, aging man burdened by the colossal weight of his own actions and the endless pursuit of his enemies. The legacy for his children is equally complex, carrying the heavy burden of a name that is globally synonymous with terror and crime, a legacy that may offer wealth but also ensures a lifetime of scrutiny and suspicion. In the final analysis, the story of Dawood Ibrahim is not one of triumph, but of a Pyrrhic victory, where the spoils of a vast criminal empire are balanced against a ledger filled with blood, trauma, and a profound, inescapable loneliness, a stark reminder that the pursuit of power through darkness ultimately consumes the pursuer, leaving behind a trail of devastation that stretches across nations and generations. The 15th segment of this narrative examines the paradoxical and deeply unsettling role that Dawood Ibrahim has come to play in the popular imagination, where the line between reviled criminal and dark anti-hero has been persistently blurred, creating a cultural mythology that often obscures the brutal reality of his actions. This transformation from a wanted terrorist into a figure of morbid fascination and even perverse admiration is a complex phenomenon, rooted in a combination of media representation, public disillusionment with established authority, and the inherent human attraction to tales of outlaw success. in the dense, crowded, and often unjust urban landscapes of India, where the common citizen frequently feels powerless against a corrupt and inefficient system. The figure of Dawood Ibrahim can sometimes be recast, particularly in certain pockets of society, as a symbol of a man who defied the entire establishment and won. His origins in the gritty, working-class neighborhood of Dongri fuel a narrative of a self-made man, a boy from the streets who used his wits and ruthlessness to build an empire that challenged the wealthy and the powerful. This narrative, however distorted, resonates with a deep-seated desire for agency in the face of systemic oppression. Bollywood has been a primary engine in the creation of this mythos. For decades, Hindi cinema has been obsessed with the gangster figure, and Dawood provided the ultimate real-life template. While some films have portrayed the unvarnished brutality of his world, many others have romanticized his rise, focusing on his charisma, his strategic genius, his code of loyalty, and his larger-than-life persona, often glossing over the cold-blooded murders, the shattered lives of the 1993 bombing's victims, and the devastating societal impact of his drug and extortion networks. The portrayal of characters based on him by charismatic superstars has further cemented this glamorized image, making the Don a figure of cool, powerful allure for impressionable audiences. The media, too, has played a dual role. While serious journalism has investigated his crimes, the tabloid press and the frenzied 24-hour news cycle have often treated his story as a sensational thriller, focusing on his elusive nature, his rumored romantic liaisons, and his lavish lifestyle, thereby feeding a public appetite for drama and spectacle. The constant, and often futile, pursuit by the authorities has only added to his legend, painting a picture of a man so clever and well connected that he can perpetually outsmart the entire state machinery. This has, in some quarters, bred a warped form of respect for his perceived invincibility. On the internet and social media, this mythology has found new life with memes, fan pages, and WhatsApp forwards often portraying him as an untouchable king or a boss, further divorcing his image from the gravity of his crimes. This cultural apotheosis is, of course, a profound insult to his victims and a dangerous distortion of history. It represents a collective failure to fully internalize the monstrosity of his actions, particularly the act of terrorism that defines him. The glamour attached to his wealth and power overshadows the reality of the heroin addicts dying in European alleys, the businessmen living in terror, and the families forever broken by the bombs of 1993. The myth of Dawood Ibrahim is ultimately a seductive but poisonous fiction, a cautionary tale about how a society can sometimes, in its search for icons of rebellion and success, mistakenly anoint a monster. It reveals a discomforting truth about the human psyche, our attraction to power, even when it is deployed for evil, and our tendency to weave compelling narratives that can, over time, sanitize even the most horrific of realities. This cultural legacy is perhaps one of the most insidious aspects of his story, for it ensures that while the man himself may eventually fade away, the romanticized legend of the untouchable lord from Dongri may continue to inspire a dangerous allure for generations to come, perpetuating a cycle where crime is not always seen as a curse, but sometimes, tragically, as a perverse form of achievement. The 16th chapter of this chronicle confronts the intricate and morally ambiguous world of those who have chosen to break their oath of silence. The key witnesses and turncoats whose testimonies have provided the most vital and often the only glimpses into the inner workings of the D Company. These individuals, living in a perpetual shadow of fear, represent the most fragile yet crucial thread in the vast tapestry of evidence against Dawood Ibrahim. Their lives a testament to the extreme risks involved in challenging his power. The most significant of these was Aziz Larkin, a once trusted aide who turned approver for the Indian government in the monumental 1993 Bombay bombings trial. Larkin's decision to break ranks and provide a detailed, first-hand account of the conspiracy, from the initial meetings in Dubai to the logistics of smuggling the RDX, was a seismic event that cracked open the case. His testimony painted a vivid picture of Dawood, not as a distant figurehead, but as the hands on mastermind, personally chairing meetings, approving plans, and authorizing the flow of funds for the operation. For the prosecution, Larkin was the star witness, the insider whose words could directly link the boss to the crime. For the D Company, he was the ultimate traitor, a man marked for death. His life after turning approver was a textbook example of the witness protection nightmare. An existence of constant relocation, assumed identities, and the unending psychological terror of knowing that one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations had issued a permanent death sentence against him. His testimony, while instrumental in convicting many lower and mid-level operatives, also highlighted the fundamental limitation of such evidence. It could not physically bring the main accused to the dock. Beyond Larkin, there have been others, though fewer and more guarded as the organization's ruthlessness became legendary. Certain Bollywood figures, under the cover of anonymity, have provided accounts to journalists and authorities about the suffocating grip of the syndicate, describing a climate of fear where refusal to comply with demands could lead to violent reprisals, not just against them, but their families. These testimonies, while rarely usable in a court of law, have helped piece together the extent of the D Company's extortion racket within the industry. Similarly, former associates who were arrested in the Gulf or Europe have, under intense interrogation, provided snippets of information about the network's international drug smuggling routes and money laundering techniques, fragments of intelligence that agencies have painstakingly assembled into a broader picture. The most dramatic defections, however, came from within the rival camps during the brutal gang war with Chota Rajan. Turncoats from both sides, seeking revenge or a reduced sentence, provided grisly details of the killings ordered by their respective bosses, offering a window into the savage mechanics of underworld warfare. The life of a D Company insider who chooses to cooperate is a Faustian bargain. In exchange for a sliver of a chance at a new life, they surrender their past, their identity, and any semblance of normalcy. They live with the knowledge that the organization's long arm has a global reach and an infinite memory for betrayal. The case of a key witness being gunned down in a European city or found dead in a Thai prison cell serves as a chilling deterrent to others who might consider speaking. This environment of omerta, enforced by terror, is one of Dawood Ibrahim's most effective shields. It ensures that while many may know his secrets, very few will ever dare to speak them aloud in a court of law. The witnesses who have come forward are therefore not just sources of information. They are symbols of extraordinary, albeit often self-interested, courage. Their fractured, fear-laced narratives are the fragile pillars upon which the entire legal edifice against the D Company rests. A constant reminder that the battle against such a powerful criminal enterprise is fought not only with guns and laws, but in the treacherous, human terrain of loyalty, fear, and the desperate hope for redemption. A battle where every word spoken against the king comes with a price tag of eternal vigilance and the very real prospect of a bloody reckoning. The 17th chapter of this saga delves into the labyrinthine and often futile international efforts to apprehend Dawood Ibrahim, a decades-long diplomatic and law enforcement campaign that highlights the profound challenges of combating stateless, politically shielded crime in a world of sovereign nations and conflicting interests. This global manhunt, involving a complex dance between Indian agencies, Interpol, the United States Department of Treasury and Intelligence Services, and various European and Asian law enforcement bodies, has been a story of tantalizingly close calls, frustrating dead ends, and the hard realities of international realpolitik. The foundation of this effort was laid with the issuance of the Red Corner, notice by Interpol at India's behest following the 1993 bombings, a move that theoretically obligated member countries to locate and provisionally arrest him pending extradition. However, this tool proved blunt against a fugitive who was not merely hiding, but was allegedly being actively sheltered by a state actor. India's diplomatic strategy has been one of relentless persuasion, consistently presenting detailed dossiers to Pakistani authorities during every bilateral forum, meticulously mapping his suspected locations in Karachi, from the upscale Clifton area to the fortified bungalows in Defense Housing Authority, and listing his known associates and family members. These dossiers, packed with cellular tower data, vehicle registration details, and eyewitness accounts, were met with a wall of official denial from Pakistan, which maintained a consistent position of having no knowledge of his presence on its soil, a stance that India and its allies have dismissed as disingenuous. The involvement of the United States, particularly after the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent global war on terror, marked a significant escalation. The U.S. designation of Dawood as a specially designated global terrorist in 2003 and the UN sanctions that followed were powerful diplomatic instruments, imposing asset freezes and travel bans. American intelligence agencies, notably the CIA and the DEA, began actively tracking his financial networks and his alleged ties to Al-Qaeda. sharing intelligence with India and pressuring Pakistan through back-channel communications. There were moments of high hope, such as in 2015, when the U.S. State Department, under its Rewards for Justice program, offered a bounty of up to $5 million for information leading to his location, a move that signaled sustained high-level interest. Yet, even this substantial incentive failed to yield a breakthrough, a testament to the impenetrable security bubble around him and the fear his organization instilled in potential informants. European agencies, particularly in the UK, Spain, and Portugal, have had sporadic successes by targeting the D company's European operations, arresting mid-level operatives involved in drug trafficking and money laundering, hoping to flip them for information on the top leadership. These operations have provided valuable insights into the network's modus operandi, but have consistently failed to get any closer to the man himself. The fundamental obstacle has always been Pakistan's purported refusal to acknowledge his presence. Without cooperation from the host nation, any plans for a covert extraction or a formal international raid remained in the realm of fantasy, a dangerous proposition that risked a major diplomatic and even military incident between two nuclear armed rivals. This geopolitical stalemate has allowed Dawood to exist in a state of perpetual limbo, a prisoner in his sanctuary, yet forever beyond the reach of the law. The international pursuit, therefore, stands as a stark lesson in the limits of global governance when faced with a willful non-compliant state. It demonstrates that red corner notices, financial sanctions, and intelligence sharing, while powerful tools, can be rendered impotent by a simple, persistent denial from a sovereign power. The case of Dawood Ibrahim is the ultimate. Known unknown, the world's most wanted man whose address is an open secret, yet whose capture remains one of the most elusive prizes in the history of international law enforcement. A permanent stain on the collective ability of the global community to hold the powerful accountable, and a sobering reminder that justice, no matter how deserved, can be held hostage by the cold, hard calculations of international politics. The 18th segment of this narrative contemplates the inevitable, yet endlessly speculated upon conclusion to this epic saga. The future of the D Company in a post-Dawood world and the myriad of complex, unresolved questions that will follow the demise of its founder. The sheer longevity of Dawood Ibrahim's reign has created an organization of such immense scale and entrenched infrastructure that his physical disappearance, whether through death, capture, or incapacitation, will not signal its end, but rather trigger a dramatic and likely violent new phase in its evolution. The first and most immediate question will be that of succession. Does power pass seamlessly to one of his sons, who have been reportedly groomed to manage the legitimate fronts of the business and may lack the street credibility and ruthless authority of their father? Or does it devolve to a long-standing, battle-hardened lieutenant within the organization, a shadowy figure who has operated for decades in Dawood's immense shadow and now sees an opportunity to claim the throne? The latter scenario carries the high probability of a brutal internal power struggle, a war of attrition that could splinter the D company into several competing factions, each controlling a different segment of the vast criminal portfolio. One group taking the narcotics trade, another the real estate extortion in Mumbai, a third the hawala and financing networks. Such a fragmentation could, in the short term, lead to a spike in violence on the streets of Mumbai and other Indian cities as these new rivalries are settled with guns and grenades. Alternatively, the organization may continue to evolve towards the decentralized, franchise-like model it has already adopted, operating as a loose confederation of criminal cells bound by the D company brand and its foundational networks, but without a single, all-powerful boss calling the shots, making it even more resilient and difficult to combat. The geopolitical ramifications are equally profound. Pakistan's stance, should Dawood die on its soil, would be a subject of intense international scrutiny. Would it continue to deny his presence, potentially dealing with the logistical and political nightmare of a secret burial, or would it be forced to admit the truth? Facing global humiliation and intensified pressure from India and the United States, his death would also remove a major, persistent irritant in India-Pakistan relations, but it would not bring closure to the 1993 bombings case, leaving the victims' families with a profound sense of unfinished justice for Indian security agencies. The end of the Dawood era would be a symbolic victory, but an operational puzzle of a different kind. Instead of hunting a single kingpin, they would be tasked with dismantling a hydra-headed monster, a task that requires a different, more nuanced strategy focused on financial disruption and targeting mid-level leadership. The D company's deep alliances with jihadist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba would also enter a period of uncertainty. While these relationships are now institutionalized, the personal rapport and trust between Dawood and the leadership of these groups may not automatically transfer to his successor, potentially leading to a realignment of the criminal terror nexus in South Asia. Furthermore, the immense financial empire, the billions of dollars in assets and cash flows, would become a prize fought over not just by criminals, but potentially by family members in international courts, leading to a series of complex legal battles that could inadvertently expose more of the network's secrets. The legend of Dawood Ibrahim himself will then enter its final, posthumous phase. Would he be remembered solely as the terrorist mastermind of the 1993 bombings, or would the romanticized, anti-establishment myth that has grown around him in some quarters persist and even solidify, transforming him into a permanent folk devil or a dark folk hero? His story, stripped of its living, breathing subject, would become pure narrative, a subject for historians, filmmakers, and sociologists to debate for generations. The end of Dawood Ibrahim, therefore, is not an end at all, but a gateway to a new, uncertain, and potentially even more volatile chapter in the annals of organized crime, a testament to the fact that the structures and systems he built have taken on a life of their own, ensuring that his shadow will loom over the underworld long after the man himself has departed the stage. The 19th chapter of this epic serves as a profound and somber reflection on the overarching themes that the life and legacy of Dawood Ibrahim represent. A meditation on the nature of power, the fragility of justice, and the indelible scars that a single individual can inflict upon the canvas of history. His story is, at its core, a dark parable of our times, a narrative that holds up a mirror to the interconnected vulnerabilities of our globalized world and the unsettling ease with which its tools can be perverted for immense profit and destruction. The rise of a boy from the crowded lanes of Dongri to become a figure who commands the attention of presidents and spy chiefs is a story that could only have unfolded in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. An era defined by the erosion of borders, the lightning speed of communication, and the fluidity of capital. Dawood Ibrahim was a pioneer in exploiting these very forces, building a stateless empire that leveraged international banking loopholes, global transport networks, and diplomatic friction to create a new paradigm of criminality that nation-states are still struggling to combat. His journey forces an uncomfortable confrontation with the concept of power itself. He demonstrated that true, enduring power in the modern age is not necessarily derived from political office or military rank, but can be amassed in the shadows through the control of illicit economies, the corruption of institutions, and the strategic application of terror. He achieved a form of sovereignty without a state, his authority enforced not by law but by fear, and his citizenship defined not by a passport, but by his ability to manipulate the levers of global finance and geopolitics. Yet, this power has proven to be a hollow, self-cannibalizing force. The man who sought absolute freedom is now one of the most imprisoned men on earth, confined to a few safe houses, his life a monument to paranoia and isolation. The pursuit of his wealth has come at the cost of his humanity, his name forever synonymous with mass murder. This is the central tragedy and the ultimate moral of his story. The pursuit of power through darkness leads not to liberation, but to the most constricting of cages. His legacy is also a stark commentary on the slow, often imperfect, machinery of justice in a complex world. For over 3 decades, the victims of his worst crime have waited for a closure that has been held hostage by international politics and the brazen defiance of a hostile state. This delay has eroded public faith and created a pervasive sense of impunity, sending a dangerous message that with enough resources and the right connections, even the most heinous crimes can be outsmarted. The Dawood Ibrahim case stands as a permanent challenge to the international legal order, a test of its resolve and its ability to hold the powerful accountable, a test that, so far, it has largely failed. Furthermore, his life is a cautionary tale about the dangerous allure of the outlaw myth, the romanticization of his rise, the glamorization of his wealth, and the fascination with his elusive nature represent a societal failure to fully comprehend the brutal reality of his actions. It reveals a discomforting truth about the human capacity to be seduced by narratives of success, even when that success is built on a foundation of corpses and broken lives. In the final analysis, the story of Dawood Ibrahim is not just the story of a gangster. It is the story of modern India itself, its explosive economic growth, its deep-seated social fractures, its struggle with terrorism, and its complex place in a volatile region. It is a story that encompasses the gritty reality of its megacities, the glamour and corruption of its film industry, the limitations of its bureaucracy, and the resilience of its people. He is a dark thread woven into the nation's fabric, a reminder of a trauma that has not healed and a justice that remains elusive. As this narrative approaches its conclusion, we are left not with a sense of resolution, but with a profound unease, a recognition that the forces he embodied, greed, corruption, communalism, and terror, are not confined to one man or one organization, but are persistent demons that every society must vigilantly guard against. The tale of the untouchable Lord is, therefore, a timeless one, a grim reminder of the price of power and the enduring human struggle between the rule of law and the temptations of the abyss. And so we arrive at the final, sobering conclusion of this decades-long saga, a story that has traversed the dusty bylanes of Dongri, the glittering skyscrapers of Dubai, the fortified safe houses of Karachi, and the hallowed halls of international power. The narrative of Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar is one that defies a neat ending, for it is a tale still being written, its final chapter locked away in the secretive corridors of intelligence agencies and the uncertain future of geopolitics. We have journeyed together through the ascent of a restless boy who gazed upon the powerful ganglords of his childhood and decided he would not just join them, but surpass them all, building an empire with a corporate ruthlessness that redefined organized crime in South Asia. We have witnessed the shocking pivot, the moment a criminal enterprise was weaponized for an act of catastrophic terrorism, forever branding its architect not just a kingpin, but a mass murderer and a global terrorist. We have explored the long, frustrating years of his fugitive status, a period where he transformed from a flamboyant don into a reclusive ghost, his physical presence fading, but his influence mutating and enduring through a decentralized, Hydra-headed network that continued to pump narcotics, counterfeit currency, and fear into the veins of societies. We have seen the human cost, the shattered lives of the 1993 bombing's victims, the terrorized businessmen, the corrupted institutions, and the broken men within his own organization who paid the price for his ambition. We have delved into the complex mythology that has grown around him, a dangerous glamorization that often obscures the brutal reality of his actions, and we have contemplated the future, a post-Dawood landscape that promises not peace, but potentially a violent and fragmented new era for his criminal franchise. His story is the ultimate paradox, a man who achieved everything he sought, immense wealth, ultimate power, a form of dark immortality, only to find it all turn to ash in his mouth, his life a gilded cage of paranoia and isolation, his name a permanent scar on the history of his homeland. He is a living testament to the fact that the pursuit of power through darkness is a self-defeating prophecy, a path that leads not to freedom, but to the most confining of prisons. The legend of Dawood Ibrahim serves as an eternal cautionary tale, a grim reminder of the fragility of our social contracts, the vulnerability of our global systems to manipulation, and the terrifying ease with which crime and terrorism can converge to challenge the very foundations of the modern state. It is a story that forces us to question the nature of justice in an interconnected world, where a man can be universally condemned yet remain permanently beyond reach, shielded by the opaque walls of international rivalry and state-sponsored denial. His enduring illusion is not a symbol of his genius, but a stain on the collective conscience of the global community, a proof of our continued inability to reconcile national sovereignty with the imperative of universal justice. As the final words of this narrative are spoken, the image that remains is not of a powerful king, but of an aging, isolated man, a ghost haunting his own life, forever looking over his shoulder, his immense power a useless currency in the face of the simple human desires for peace, for home, for redemption, desires he sacrificed at the altar of his own boundless ambition. The story of the untouchable Lord is, in the end, a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, a saga of rise and fall, but a fall that occurs not in a dramatic crash, but in a slow, silent dissolution into the very shadows from which he emerged.